Who are you really without your mind? That is the first and most important question you can ask yourself. How do you reach that discovery? Stay until the end of this video, and you will receive both answers. We usually associate waiting with boredom or irritation. It happens when you are standing in a long queue, or when you are waiting for the answers promised at the end of this video and want to skip the whole explanation to get them quickly and clearly. That ordinary kind of waiting denies the present moment because it fixes attention entirely on the future, turning the minutes in front of you into a heavy obstacle. But there is another kind of waiting, qualitatively different, with no connection to impatience. It is a suspended state that demands complete wakefulness. Imagine the morning instant when you open your eyes 1 minute before the alarm rings. You are already awake, your body is still, and the mind has not yet begun building the day's list of tasks. In that second of silence, there are no problems and no plans, only alert presence, with all your attention gathered in the current moment. There is no room for daydreaming, replaying old mistakes, or anticipating what comes next. There is no tension, and fear disappears because you are present with your whole being. This video explores Eckhart Tolle's teaching on that silent space we all carry within us, a space few traditions have identified with such clarity. If you follow the indications I will explain later, you will be able to enter the present state. Your mind hides behind a surge of thoughts. In that clean observation, the character you feed every day with the memories of the past and projections of the future begins to fade. The usual labels lose strength. Even so, I can assure you that you lose nothing of real value. On the contrary, you discover that you are more yourself than at any other moment in your life. It is the first time you experience your true identity without the filter of mental judgments. Ancient texts contain stories that illustrate this attitude towards life. One speaks of a servant waiting for his master's return with absolute attention. Because he does not know the exact hour of arrival, he stays awake with his eyes open so he does not miss the reunion. Another story describes 5 wise women who kept enough oil in their lamps to keep them burning through the night, unlike 5 careless women who were left in darkness and missed a wedding celebration. These stories are often interpreted as predictions of final catastrophes, but they actually describe the end of psychological time. The oil represents the steady attention needed not to miss the only instant that exists. The teachings of Tolle explained in this video point directly towards going beyond the limits imposed by the ego. They show that it is possible to live from a clean state of consciousness, a space where the mind no longer drags you behind every thought. It is an invitation to experience a reality beyond ordinary words. Perhaps you will notice that you have walked along that silent edge many times without knowing how to name it. Stay with that recognition because the next step is not to think more deeply, but to wait in a way that reveals who is waiting behind the mind inside you right now. Zen masters use the word satori to name those flashes of understanding when the noise in the head stops and you experience absolute presence. Although that flash does not create a permanent change in your life, it lets you taste the real flavor of awakening. You have probably touched that space many times without understanding what it meant or giving it the importance it deserved. To perceive the majesty or the sacred character of nature, you have to be truly there. It happens when you look at the endless sky on a clear night and feel moved by immense stillness, or when you hear water running through trees and a bird singing at dusk. For that beauty to reveal itself, the mind has to fall silent. Think of a walk through a park where you were surrounded by beautiful trees, yet barely registered the landscape because you were replaying an old argument or planning tomorrow's errands. Then, at other times, you stare at an ordinary object, a coffee cup on the table or a dry leaf on the ground, and suddenly that simple thing gains extraordinary texture and reality because thought stops for 1 second. Beyond the colors and forms of what you see, there is an unnamed sacred background that shines whenever beauty appears. That depth reveals itself only when you are present. The same mind that cannot stop talking is the mind preventing you from seeing what is right in front of you. Silence is not merely the absence of thought. It is the necessary condition for something real to arrive. Perhaps that mysterious essence and your own presence are the same thing. When you experience these moments of clean attention, the speed with which the inner monologue returns prevents you from noticing that you were in a thought-free state. The gap between pure observation and the next an idea is usually so brief that it passes unnoticed. Your Satori lasts only a few seconds before the head takes control again. The human mind cannot recognize or manufacture real beauty. Only in moments of absolute stillness can you be surrounded by it. The depth of a human being is measured by the width of that wordless space. A person trapped in the head inhabits a world where nature has ceased to exist. Some people say a flower is beautiful, but they say it as a mechanical and empty label. Because they are not still, they look without seeing, missing the holiness of the living being before them, and remaining blind to their own ground. We live in a culture ruled by the tyranny of intellect. That is why much current music, architecture, and art feels drained of soul and inner force. Many contemporary creators cannot step away from thought even for an instant, and the mind abandoned to itself always produces distortion. Notice how quickly this happens inside you. A moment of quiet appears, and almost immediately the mind names it, judges it, compares it, or tries to preserve it. The living experience becomes a possession. Even spirituality can become another commentary when the ego turns presence into an achievement. That is why Tolle insists on simple awareness rather than clever interpretation. The doorway is not hidden in more thought, but in the space that opens when thought releases its grip for a moment inside you now. You can see this in museums, but also in the landscapes of our cities and abandoned industrial zones. If that mental disorder can make the outer world ugly, the danger becomes greater when the same machinery turns inward and persuades you that you are the noise it produces. When you become conscious of your true essence, what is really happening is that this same essence is becoming conscious of itself. Being present means awareness recognizing its own existence, and you do not need to understand this with the intellect before you can experience it. Everything around you shares that same divine quality at some level, with some degree of perception. Even a stone contains a rudimentary form of sensitivity, suggesting that everything is alive. The sun, the earth, plants, animals, and human beings are expressions of one force appearing at different scales. The whole world works like a divine game in which individual life forms have no ultimate importance. In the ocean, most creatures survive only minutes after birth, and even the human body returns quickly to the earth. This becomes tragic only when you insist on creating a separate identity for each passing form. It is like a fish in a home aquarium. If you give it a name, write it a birth certificate, and soon afterwards another fish eats it, the event feels like a disaster because you projected an independent entity where there was none. Universal consciousness takes the disguise of bodies and objects until it loses itself inside them. In our species, that force is so identified with outward appearance that it recognizes itself only through the material plane, living with constant panic at the idea of its destruction. Think of the moment when the possibility of losing a job, a relationship, or simply your reputation triggered a disproportionate fear that clouded your reasoning. That is the ego defending its disguise, although even that confusion belongs to the larger movement. Fortunately, the pressure of suffering produced by this disorder eventually forces awakening from the dream. When self-awareness returns, it does so with a depth greater than before it was lost. There is an ancient parable about a young man who leaves his father's house. wastes his fortune abroad, and ends as a beggar. The harshness of his misery finally drives him home, where his father receives him with an even greater love. Suffering is not the problem. It is the mechanism that eventually makes you remember what you have always been. The traveler does not return home because he found the correct answer, but because pain exhausted him enough to stop running. His condition is identical and different at the same time, because it has gained an added dimension. He has completed the journey from unconscious perfection through difficulty into awakened maturity. You can test this mystery now. Close your eyes for a moment and ask yourself what your next thought will be. Become very alert and wait for the idea to appear, like a cat watching a mouse hole, absolutely still, waiting to see what will come out. That stretch of time in which you remained attentive, waiting for the thought, is a state of presence. As long as you stay in that intensity, the mind stops. You are still and fully awake. Inhabiting the body from within anchors you in the present moment and prevents the mental current from carrying you away. That silence is not something new. It is what remains when the head becomes quiet, a stillness the social world has spent a long time trying to suppress. Because this stillness threatens every identity built on noise. It asks nothing from the future and borrows nothing from the past. It does not need your history, your achievements, or your wounds to prove that you exist. For a second, the observer and the observed are not two separate things. Awareness recognizes itself through you, and the question, "Who am I without my mind?" stops being theory. It becomes the most intimate fact of your own living presence here now. Each time you manage to observe your mind, you withdraw consciousness from thought and become the silent witness of your own head. That observer is pure perception, existing beyond the material plane, a force that strengthens as mental formations lose their command over you. To watch what you think is an event of cosmic scale. Through your gaze, universal consciousness begins to wake from its long sleep of identification with matter. That tiny distance between the one who thinks and the one who observes thought is exactly the territory where everything changes. You do not need to understand it. You only need to notice it. This individual awakening prefigures an event that probably belongs to a remote future in chronological time. We are speaking of the true end of the world, a phrase that doesn't mean the physical destruction of the planet, but the end of absolute identification between consciousness and physical or mental forms. When perception is released from those bonds, it becomes illuminated presence. This has already happened in isolated individuals, and it may be destined to expand on a large scale, although no one can claim certainty that it will happen. The vast majority of human beings remain under the rule of the egoic structure, captured by an intellect that controls their lives. Those who fail to break that circle in time will be destroyed by their own heads, dragged towards confusion, violence, illness, despair, and madness. The intellect governed by the ego resembles a sinking ship, forcing you to jump if you do not want to sink with it. In fact, the present collective mind is the most destructive and dangerous entity that has ever walked the earth. It is frightening to imagine this planet's future if human mentality does not undergo a profound transformation. You can feel the closeness of that danger in recent ordinary situations. It appears in the argument where a hurtful word jumped out of your mouth before you could stop it, or in the impulsive decision you made under anger and regretted hours later, after seeing that your reaction was wildly disproportionate. That was the ego taking complete control of your actions and dragging you with it. In those moments, the thinking mind does not serve life. It hijacks life and calls the hijacking truth. For many people, the only relief from this tyranny is to descend temporarily to a level of consciousness below thought. We all reach that refuge in deep sleep, but we also seek it through sex, alcohol, and chemical substances designed to dull excessive brain activity. If society did not have alcohol, tranquilizers, antidepressants, and illegal drugs in massive quantities, the madness of the human mind would be visible to everyone. If humanity were suddenly deprived of these painkillers, a considerable part of the population would become dangerous to itself and to others. Substance use simply keeps people stuck inside their own dysfunction. Drugs are not an isolated anomaly, and they are not only a moral weakness. They are the most honest evidence of how much pain is generated by living trapped in the mind without finding a real exit. They reveal the urgency of another direction, not downward beneath ideas, but upward beyond them. The answer is not to make yourself unconscious. The answer is to become conscious enough that thought no longer possesses you. Then the sinking ship is no longer your home. It becomes a warning, and the witness learns to stand above the storm without escaping life or abandoning the world itself again. Falling back to a lower level beneath the mind is not a real alternative for our species. There is no way to reverse this evolutionary process. If humanity wants to secure its survival on this planet, it must move towards the next step of its development. Perception is evolving across the universe through billions of different forms. Even if humanity failed, that outcome would matter little on a cosmic scale, because no gain in the fabric of consciousness is ever truly lost. It simply finds other channels through which to manifest. The fact that this material exists, and that you are listening to it now, is a clear sign that this new mentality is gaining ground on Earth. Your listening is not accidental. The mind that seeks to understand itself is already one step beyond the mind that merely reacts. That inward movement is precisely the right direction. There is nothing personal in this encounter, because you are that same perception listening to itself through this account. The one who shares the message and the one who receives it create the teaching together in this exact instant. Words alone have no real value. They do not contain truth. They point towards it. Silence is a far more powerful vehicle than any articulated sentence. As you listen to this narration, notice the empty space separating one word from the next. That silence between phrases exists right now, beneath the sound of my voice, and you do not need to make any effort to search for it. It is perfect stillness, holding each sound and giving every pause its depth. Stop chasing the meaning of the sentences, even for a moment, and that hidden dimension becomes evident. Attending to that stillness wherever you are makes you present. Even in the loudest environment, a background of calm remains between the vibrations. Paying attention to outer silence creates immediate stillness inside you. Only the stillness you carry within can perceive that calm dimension outside, reflecting a clean presence that has begun to loosen the grip of thought. The physical body can become a direct point of access to the territory of your deepest essence. That dimension cannot be grasped through intellect. It must be perceived directly. It is like a fish trying to discover what water is, unaware that it is already submerged in it. Your sacred ground can never become an object of study for reason, because in that space, the observer and the observed merge into one indivisible reality. This essence is recognized as the principle of identity that remains present beyond your name or personal history. To inhabit that rooted state is awakening, discovering the truth that frees you from the false belief that you are only a piece of flesh or a stream of thoughts. Fear disappears when the illusion feeding it fades. The suffering you inflict on yourself and others begins to heal when the invented character no longer governs what you think, say, and do. Then a question opens that no thought can answer for you. Who remains when the mind is silent? Do not rush to answer. Let the question fall into the body, into the chest, into the breath. The answer will not arrive as a sentence. It arrives as a recognition, a quiet certainty that you were never the noise trying to describe you. You were the space in which it appeared. And once that is seen, the path no longer leads downward into dullness, but upward into awareness, where life is felt directly before the mind divides it into words. That is the threshold this teaching is pointing towards, and the next question begins exactly there, in the silence listening through you now, without effort today. When you set aside religious associations, the figure of Christ reveals itself as the divine presence living within you. Whether or not you have recognized it, the word points to the deep perception that has awakened from the mental dream, so you can replace it with pure attention, if that is more meaningful for your own process. Many common misunderstandings around this figure disappear the moment you understand that, in that sacred dimension, there is no past and no future. To say that this essence belonged to another age, or will arrive later, is a contradiction, because eternity knows only the present instant. The one who existed in chronological time was Jesus, a man who walked the earth 2,000 years ago and realized that true nature in ordinary experience. When the ancient texts declare that true identity existed before the ancestors were born, they are not describing survival across days and years. Such a claim would remain trapped inside time and physical form. The sudden use of the present tense breaks the continuity of a sentence that seems to come from the past, marking a complete rupture with the calendar. Through that constructive break, the teaching communicates the reality of self-realization, crossing the border ruled by historical periods and entering the kingdom of the timeless. That figure became a clear channel for unfiltered perception. Divinity itself is expressed in the present tense, excluding memory and projection, and resting in pure presence. The announced global transformation does not refer to the physical return of a man or woman on the material plane, but to a profound mutation in the consciousness of the species. It means shifting the center of gravity from the calendar to the instant, rescuing pure perception from the rule of thought. What Jesus called the second coming is not a future event, but a change that happens when the mind stops being the center of who you are. It does not come from outside. It occurs exactly in the territory this video has been exploring from the beginning. If that force returned tomorrow in an outward form, its words would only remind you that truth, divinity, and eternal life are happening in you, right here and now. Avoid giving this essence a human outline or turning it into an identity with a fixed shape. The great guides and the very few awakened teachers who have lived have no special qualities on the personal level. Because they do not carry an invented character to maintain, defend, or feed each day, they are simpler and more ordinary than most people. In fact, someone trapped in a powerful ego will often judge them as insignificant. The nearness of that stillness can be sensed in daily life. Think of a day when you met a stranger in a trivial situation and felt an unusual calm radiating from their presence, without being able to explain rationally where that peace came from. If you feel drawn to an awakened guide, it is because the lucidity needed to recognize that reflection of light already lives within you, using the encounter to remind you who you are beyond your name. Shared work can intensify this inner attention. A group gathered in silence creates a powerful collective field, raising the level of each participant and helping to weaken the mental tyranny of society. Yet this benefit contains a risk. If there is not at least one person firmly rooted in stillness, the egoic structure will try to recover control and sabotage the effort. Collective practice has immense value, but it is not enough by itself. You may become dependent if you turn it into a permanent refuge. External guidance should serve only the transition, because the final doorway into that calm lives in a dimension you carry with you at every instant, and it does not depend on any teacher to open. That is why the real teaching always returns you to yourself. The teacher, the scripture, the group, the voice in this video. All are temporary fingers pointing towards the same silent fact. If you cling to the finger, you create another religion of dependency. If you follow the direction, attention turns inward and discovers the source from which all guidance comes. The master outside is useful only until the master within awakens. Then the world itself becomes instruction, a pause, a breath, a disappointment, a face, a sound. Every event asks whether you will identify with thought or remain as presence. And in that choice, Christ is no longer a distant figure. It is the clarity looking through your eyes now. Who are you without your mind? As we have seen, this truth reveals itself when you stop identifying with the outer physical form. To believe you are only this material body is a mirage that reduces your true dimension to a shell. The continuous mental monologue absorbs your awareness and turns it into mental material, making compulsive thought a collective illness. Without deep-rootedness, you build a vulnerable character that uses fear to protect itself from the world. When you ask who is speaking in your mind, you are not that voice that never stops. It is what occupies the space where you should be. Who you are without your mind is exactly what remains when that voice falls silent. That emptiness is the direct answer to your invisible identity. You are alert waiting, the stillness that perceives the beauty of the world, the silent observer, and the divinity living within you. How can you discover it? It requires a subtle turn of attention, happening now. You can practice it if you wish. The first movement is to rescue the energy trapped in the intellect and bring it directly into the body, allowing these words to serve as a natural bridge into your physical plane. Feel the living field in your hands at this exact instant, a real presence that does not need to be manufactured by imagination. There may be a faint tingling in the palms, or a diffuse warmth pulsing beneath the skin, confirming that you exist beyond intellectual concepts. You are not thinking about your hands, you are feeling their latent biological reality. That same attention expands naturally into your arms, your chest, and your abdomen, revealing that the current shaping your organism was always there, waiting to be noticed. Every corner of your matter that receives this gaze becomes more alive, not because its structure changes suddenly, but because the light of clean perception removes the mental anesthesia that used to cover everything. This field, filling the whole body at once, has no fixed boundary and no defined outline. It opens into an inner dimension that is spacious and deep. The inner body is the exact threshold between the frightened character you believe yourself to be and your invisible essential nature. That threshold is active now as you listen, working without complex techniques or external guides. It only depends on attention moving back to where it always belonged, settling into the stillness of your cells. Something inside you has just been registered for the first time. A breach has opened in the surface, and it cannot fully close again. From here, the question no longer asks for an explanation. It asks for presence. Stay with the body, stay with the silence, and you will sense the answer before the mind can turn it into another story. This is who you were before thought claimed your name and your life again. And that concludes our video. If you enjoyed the content as much as we did, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your feedback and suggestions for future videos. And don't forget to turn on notifications to stay up to date with all our updates. Thanks for being part of our community. See you in the next video.